thank you everybody for coming on to the Trusted Advisor Abuse Name It to Prevent It webinar. And my name is Gabriella Grant. I am the director of the California Center of Excellence for Trauma-Informed Care, located in the lovely seaside town of Santa Cruz, California. What we're doing is we're going to be talking about something called trusted advisor abuse. And this is a new way of describing an old form of perpetration. So there's nothing new about the perpetration. It's just without a name, we don't even know how to identify it. We don't even know how to intervene with it. Trusted advisor abuse is a specific perpetrator who identifies a victim population that is their preferred victim population, and then identifies an organization or a system that both provides access to that identified victim population and provides coverage for the abuse. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Trusted advisor abuse is a perpetrative form of abuse that requires a system or an organization in order to take place. So as a part of trying to promote both the phrase trusted advisor abuse and stopping it, we have developed a website. Lorena has been one of the most active website developers, and we're going to bring her in with some of her insights into the podcast and also into this webinar, into this website review. So Lorena, feel free to kind of hop in and talk a little bit about the website if you want to. But here it is. It's called Complaint Web: Trusted Advisor Abuse. Protect yourself and take action. Lorena, any thoughts about our website?
Sorry, I was muted. So the homepage just describes just kind of what trusted advisor abuse is. It gives a brief definition and also educates the reader that there are many different trusted advisors out there, whether it's a faith minister, it's your doctor, it's your lawyer, it's your athletic coach. And so our main goal with this website is to really educate the public on how to protect yourself from trusted advisor abuse, how to identify it, what you can do to, whether it's complain, file a complaint, and the page that Gabby is on, it shows all of the reported cases that we've been following in the media and cases that have done a great job in the sense of they've held their perpetrator accountable. But we do want you all to know it took many years for the perpetrator or the trusted advisor to be reprimanded. So yeah, we just definitely encourage you after this webinar, take a look at the website, explore, do some research, educate yourself, because now that we have more time to do it now with everything going on, it's definitely a good place to start.
Thanks, Lorena. And so on the website, you're going to find reasons to consider a complaint, those reported cases of trusted advisor abuse. Unfortunately, they just keep on coming. We really focus on giving people their rights, filing complaints via licensing bodies in California. So one thing to think about is that we did focus most of our information in terms of filing complaints for the state of California. Every state is different. Every complaint system is confusing. So if any of you are outside of California and you want to kind of do a trusted advisor abuse page for your state, get in touch with us. We're really interested in doing something like that. Also, advocacy groups that fight abuse within various professions. Again, this is not new. It's just a new way to understand it and stop it. And then we also have additional resources that we found along the way. One of our resources that we developed, and Lorena was very, she actually developed the whole thing, is a handout that we give to people, which is called Can Spirituality Help People Recover After Trauma? And in addition to giving people some good research on how spirituality is actually a very evidence-based way to recover from trauma, we also highlight trusted advisor abuse so that people are also armed with information so that they can help themselves by identifying trusted abusers, trusted advisors who also are abusers. And so that is also on the website. So there's a lot of good information on here, and we're hopeful that people take a little bit of a tour through the pages and see what's there. We also have the opportunity to advocate for some cases. So if you know of a case that needs advocacy in some way, we're happy to lend our expertise to that case in whatever way possible. So some of the advocacy that we've been doing over the past several years, and with the arrival of Natasha, we're going to be definitely bumping up our advocacy. We have been sending letters out to various organizations that are now being held accountable to stop perpetrators from being able to perpetrate within their systems and sports and organizations. So we wrote a letter about trusted advisor abuse and the Larry Nassar case, and we sent that to the U.S. representatives on the House Energy and Commerce Committees, to the Safe Sport, the federally mandated organization that is supposed to oversee Olympic sports for the United States, as well as give guidance for all sports organizations. And then we also sent it to the U.S. Gymnastics and their representatives, Carrie Perry and Suzanne Lyons. And you can see right here in this, I'll get a pen going. You can see right here in this little snippet from a newspaper article, USA Gymnastics may have not been the hand that ultimately abused those innocent children, but it was definitely the arm. Shelley Haymaker, an Indiana attorney who represents abuse victims in child welfare cases. My dog is rolling around very happily back here, so I think people might hear that. So Shelley Haymaker very nicely said. I really couldn't say it any better. So now I'm going to sit back and really try to explain trusted advisor abuse. So before I do, I want to bring in Lorena. Does anybody have any questions or comments from the chat box? Or Lorena, do you have anything that you would like to say before I kind of piece apart this trusted advisor abuse and we get down to some brass tacks?
No, I think you hit up all the good points on what it is and how to identify it.
All right. Well, we're just getting started. So trusted advisor abuse is a public health problem. And when we say a public health problem, what we mean is that we apply the socio-cultural lens of public health to the problem. And then we see it usually in four, sometimes it's five, but four main lenses. And what we look at in terms of public health is, first of all, we look at the individual, right? Here's an individual, and there are strengths and weaknesses, strengths and areas of challenge for the individual. And we look at that as its own lens. And I'll come to apply this lens to trusted advisor abuse. We then have another lens where we look at interpersonal or relational interactions. That when an individual connects with another individual and interacts with these individuals, there's a new lens that we apply. It is different, right? I am myself, Gabby, but when I'm interacting with other people, there is something unique that's happening there. And so we're going to apply the interpersonal or relational lens to trusted advisor abuse. The next layer that we look at is called community, if that's kind of like a larger population geographically often, or a specific organization, agency, right? So we can apply this lens to a community, for example, my neighborhood, the Seabright neighborhood in Santa Cruz, California, or to a community that I identify with, nonviolence activists, for example, or some other kind of, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation grouping that would also be community. Or an organization, whether that's U.S. Gymnastics or Amherst College or, a specific jail, Santa Cruz County Jail, for example. Then we go up one more level, and this level is the societal level, the systemic level, the cultural level. And we see that each one of these levels have their own unique dynamics, and each one of us are affected by each of these levels. Without applying the socio-ecological model to any public problem, we often don't see the distinction between these layers. So in public health, we always look at this, and we apply unique responses to each level. Okay, so in terms of trusted advisor abuse, let's start with this society and systems section first. So for trusted advisor abuse to actually happen, there has to be a society or a system or a culture that, generally speaking, has very few protections for victims. And where there are protections for victims, they are hard fought, meaning the victims had to fight real hard to get any of these few protections. They were never given, they were never a part of the culture, the system, or the society. Although the society, system, or culture will often, use these hard fought by victim rights or victim protections as reasons why they're actually not abusive. So on the next level, we see within these communities, right, or within these organizations, for trusted advisor abuse to actually happen, these smaller units, community organizational units, will see the abusers actually as good people who would never do such a thing. And they claim innocence through their ignorance, or that they tried to do something, but nobody did but this, that, and the other thing, right? So we really see these communities as often aghast, when the obvious smacks them in the face, when really they kind of should have known all along. And there's actually aspects of accomplice within such claimed ignorance. For trusted advisor abuse to happen, then there is an interpersonal aspect, right? This abuse, like sexual assault, like workplace harassment, like domestic violence, is very much an interpersonal or relational form of abuse. A trusted advisor is abusing someone who has given trust either to that individual or to that system or to that organization, and that trust is being used in order to gain access to the victim, right? So there's fundamentally an interpersonal or relational aspect to trusted advisor abuse. However, there is also an imbalance of power. Bigger, stronger, older, richer, more degrees, more years in the field. The list is long of these imbalances of power. The people who are on the less powerful side of this imbalance, they feel this imbalance. They feel it, and they speak up about it, right? They say, hey, this doesn't feel balanced in the power dynamic here in some form or another. However, as proof of this example, and folks, I'm sure many people have seen these kind of examples, when the less powerful person, who is much more perceptive of the imbalance than the person who has more power, I'll get to them in a second, but when the less powerful person inevitably does say something, hey, this isn't, actually working out, the person with more power in this relationship will be insulted. What are you talking about? They might actually take one of those few protections that were hard fought from before and say, see this, and then actually sometimes even use those protections against the person who spoke up to say that there was an imbalance of power. Right? So one of the interesting ways to uncover an imbalance of power is maybe to test it and say, hey, it feels like there's a little bit of an imbalance of power. And if the individual is aghast, insulted, and then feels somehow emboldened to use those very protections against you or against that less powerful person, boom, we've just uncovered the imbalance of power. The less powerful, however, in this relationship, right? In this relationship, The less powerful are always made to feel like they're the responsible ones. The gymnasts were made to feel responsible for their desire to go to the US Olympics as the reason why all this abuse was okay, right? Children who were abused by faith personnel of all ilks were told that it was God's will, God's plan, and God would be very upset if they didn't do what they were told to do, right? So within these relationships, the less powerful are made to feel over responsible, not just overly responsible, yes, but responsible at the very nature, at the very core of what is going on here. So there is actually no responsibility other than the responsibility of self, right? There is no other responsibility. The responsibility is fully on the side of the perpetrator. And that perpetrator, the more powerful person, the trusted advisor particularly, takes no responsibility at all. And, we've got a lot going on these days, guys, and trusted advisor abuse probably resonates a lot on what we have going on in terms of police on Black violence and brutality, and the militarization of the police response to the protests against such brutality. But here's like the big signal, in my mind anyway, and you guys can chime in as well, which is when a person who is quote unquote taking responsibility makes a conditional taking of responsibility. If you got offended, Lorena, when I said this and that, then I am so sorry that you got offended, right? So that is the calling card of this dynamic, where the person, when they have to take responsibility, they still are unable to do it. Then finally, but most importantly, here is the victim of trusted advisor abuse. This individual is vulnerable. There is an inherent vulnerability if you're a child, you're younger, you're smaller, you're less wealthy. There are inherent vulnerabilities in certain populations. And notice that trusted advisors find organizations that are often designed to quote unquote help these vulnerable populations. Example, Jerry Sandusky founded a nonprofit for fatherless boys. Oh, look at that. Boys, adolescent boys were his preferred target population. And he founded a nonprofit to help fatherless boys, right? So, unfortunately, these trusted advisors often look like pillars of the community, right? Anywho, let's get back to the victims. So the victims are fundamentally vulnerable. There is a vulnerability that should be protected, and instead it is unprotected. And as a matter of fact, the victim can be made to feel responsible for even being vulnerable. This individual fears worse is going to happen. Like whatever is happening in this trusted advisor abuse dynamic, the victim is the one who's fearing that worse is going to happen, not the perpetrator. The victim, however, displaces action, right? Away from the self and towards a hero. So the victim hopes for a hero to protect because the victim should be protected. It's not false for the victim to want protection, right? But in the trauma dynamic, the victim hopes for this hero. However, that increases their vulnerability. And the hero that comes in to protect the victim might end up actually harming the victim again. Meaning that if I go and say that my teacher has been doing something weird, maybe to my coach might actually say, "Hi, I'm going to protect you from that person," and maybe does, but then proceeds to abuse me, right? Here's fundamentally the victim. The victim blames the victim, and society blames the victim. Organization blames the victim. The abuser blames the victim, and the victim blames the victim. So I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to bring in Lorena and, just ask for her thoughts. but also to encourage folks to maybe put something in the chat box, or, let's see if we can get a little bit of a discussion going. Lorena, any thoughts on what I just went over? And then we'll check in on the chat box.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for that, Gabby. In particular, I was especially moved by the point about just the individual and the self, and how certain people are more vulnerable to trusted advisor abuse, whether it's children, whether it's people from disadvantaged backgrounds, people of color. It's really important to recognize the factors that put people in these situations, and that we have to almost check ourselves when we do engage in that victim blaming and that victim shaming. And so that really, hit home with me for sure.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, the victim blames the victim, and everybody else blames the victim too. So that's how we can identify the victim. But, why aren't we identifying the perpetrator, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what's interesting about the whole thing is, here's the victim, and what we require as a society is systems, communities, relationships, self-knowledge to give people protection. And then one way for us to protect these vulnerable populations, ourselves actually, is to be able to identify these perpetrators. So I'm going to spend some time now trying to help us see if we can start to identify these perpetrators, right? Who are these people? They hide among us. And when I say that, it sounds kind of scary and super duper creepy and paranoid, but that's kind of the truth. That is their talent, as a matter of fact. Lorena, any other thoughts? Anything from the chat box? Let's see if there's some more.
They hide in plain sight.
They definitely do.
Yes.
They definitely do. Absolutely. So being able to see and know what trusted advisor abuse, hugely helpful. So without a name, no one knows what it is. And as a matter of fact, the most common way that we have dealt with trusted advisor abuse is as a bad apple. When it's dealt with as a bad apple. Let's get rid of this person and actually kick them down the road, and many times not even deal with what they've done. Just simply get them out of the organization. Get the bad apple, throw it out of the organization. But without a name, nobody really knows what it is. And so the bad apple effect becomes the only response. This is just an example of a coach somewhere in the Northwest, Oregon maybe. And you can see one parent says, I'm writing as a concerned parent. I feel that some of the things that are going on with WSU are completely out of control, right? Some of the things completely out of control. Personal information blanked out, but they don't know what to call it, right? Some things. Another parent, football, phone calls to chew players out at 2 a.m. Sunday morning, the sand pit, turning fire hoses and knocking players down, constant belittling. I wouldn't have played for Leach. Sooner or later, you're going to get sued over Leach. So, here, I don't know, here, this parent, sounds like a lawyer to me. They're kind of like writing, here are facts, but they still don't know what to call it. Here's another person. I think this person is an employee. As I transition out of day-to-day football coverage, I want to reiterate my concerns about player health and safety, which we have discussed at various times over the past 9 months. As you know, my concerns revolve around certain practices of the coaching staff that put the health and safety of the student athletes at risk. In particular, these practices include punishment, workouts that are dangerously excessive. Thank you for your continued help in these matters. Cordially, goodbye. You can almost see, again, legalistic, right? I'm going to cover my you-know-what by writing these little words down, but they don't know what to call it, right? There's nothing designed to help people identify what is actually going on. So We have a definition of trusted advisor abuse, and it occurs when a person in a position of trust, such as a teacher, a faith minister, a therapist, a doctor, a nurse, a treatment provider, a lawyer, a coach, a yoga instructor, or financial planner, and the list goes on from there, uses that position of trust to abuse and control a patient, client, parishioner, or athlete, often for a very long period of time, right? This abuse is highly relational. It's typically very relational, whereby the person feels a special bond or a special connection to this trusted advisor. Betrayal of this person may seem worse than the abuse itself, right? So that gymnast or that parishioner, or that patient feels that, oh my gosh, if I ruin this doctor's reputation, that's going to be really, really terrible. And we often see organizations try to say, well, maybe this bad thing happened, but look at all the good work we're doing over here, right? There's often this sense that there might be a little bit of bad as long as there's a lot of good, and that is part of the cultural messages that allow trusted advisor abuse to continue. Trusted advisor abuse is cloaked by societal messages and expectations, mainly about trust. That is, trust is a good thing, and it's a good thing to give people your trust, and it's a good thing for people to trust you. And who should be trusted, right? Who is trustworthy? Who does our society say is trustworthy? Frankly, our society tells us that police are trustworthy, right? Although there might be certain communities where there are different messages, but our broader American society has definitely sent us a message that, police are trustworthy. And so when that happens, those messages cloak the trusted advisor abuse. So people in authority, people who are well-respected, people who are highly accomplished. How many cases? Lorena has gone through these cases. I'm sorry, Lorena, for having to go through all these cases because there are just so many. Every time I read a newspaper, there's a case. But here's what I also notice. They don't know what to call it. It's all being called something else. Abuse scandal, self-help cult, sex cult, sexual abuse, child sexual abuse. Sexual abuse, but it's not just sexual abuse, right? There's this trust layer that is not being identified. However, if you look at most police reports, a cop who goes in and makes a police report, most police reports are standard forms. And in the ones that I've seen, there's actually a little section when police are taking a report, which says something along the lines of, is this person in a position of trust? And you check a little box in the police report. Is this person in a position of trust? Because police know that investigating trusted advisor abuse is really, really challenging because very often the victims do not participate. Okay, I've said a lot, and we're going to talk about how to resolve this problem in a second. But I just want to make sure, are we kind of seeing how trusted advisor abuse is a way to actually prevent trusted advisor abuse, intervene in trusted advisor abuse, and hold abusers accountable. So that's kind of where I want to bring in Lorena. Let's have a little conversation. And if anybody wants to go to the chat box, that's great.
Yeah, of course. I definitely also want to take the time to educate you all on kind of what's going on in this slide. You might recognize some of these names, some of these faces. We have Larry Nasser here in the top right, the gymnast or the USA Gymnastics team doctor who sexually assaulted, abused gymnasts. We have in the middle here, Keith Rainier, the cult leader of Nexium that was supposed to be this self-help group, this promising of self-improvement. And then later it was revealed that they were totally running this sex ring, sex trafficking young women. And And we have this Dartmouth College professors, 3 trusted men in a position of power abusing their graduate students. The bottom left is an Oklahoma City police officer, which we'll delve into later, totally just preying on vulnerable African American women, and using his badge and his position to just inflict crime on others. And then these 2 newspaper clippings here, the one in the bottom right, and then the abuse of faith, are 2 prime examples of trusted advisor abuse within religious institutions, and the sex registry that came out of them, sex offender registry. And then we have a hashtag Time's Up, ending sexual abuse in the yoga community. And you might recognize the names of the famous gurus John Friend and Bikram Choudhury, hot yoga, Bikram yoga, and these men in power utilizing their positions to just abuse their followers, abuse their community. And it largely just goes unchecked because it's just enveloped and disguised in all of these different layers. So I wanted to just take the time to break down what was going on in this slide.
Thank you very much, Lorena. And what do you think about the fact that they're all talking about the same thing, but we wouldn't know that?
Yeah, I think it just emphasizes more why it's so difficult to identify it for the victim. Sometimes difficult to identify they're being abused. Sometimes difficult for the bystander, other people in that community, and it just more so perpetuates that cycle and keeps it for, continuing and getting worse. So it's definitely it's tricky to talk about and to identify it. So
yeah. So yeah. I'm wondering if folks out there listening, are you willing to start to use the word trusted advisor abuse? That when, at least, try it out, see what it sounds like when you actually say these words. Lorena, have you talked to anybody outside of our group about trusted advisor abuse?
Yeah, I definitely talked to some of my coworkers about it, especially since I do work in the healthcare field. And so there's numerous cases out there about doctors abusing their patients, therapists, especially so many cases about therapists out there. And so just trying to get that conversation going and realizing that like you are in a lower position of power when you're that power dynamic, and we are all susceptible to this. So I think it's just really important to get that message out there, because sometimes you think like, oh, I can identify this, I will never be a victim, but that type of mindset can really be dangerous.
And how have those conversations, how have people responded to the phrase trusted advisor abuse?
Yeah, Michelle was talking about how the victim is reinforced into silence even while it continues to themselves and watching it happen to others. Fawn's been using the term since she heard it from you years ago. And Nancy was saying that when they think of trusted advisor abuse, they think of it as sexually, and it's a good point to realize that it's not just sexual, it's physical and financial and all other folks.
Yes, and it's not just men. Right? That women, as well as people who identify differently, it kind of crosses all lines. And as a matter of fact, can be part of the cover-up, right? Women are not perpetrators. Well, if you're a female perpetrator, that's a great message, right? But men and gendered messages around masculinity also hide a lot of men's perpetration. Boys will be boys, for example.
Yep.
So there's no gender that's protected. There's no race that's protected. There's no religion that's protected from trusted advisor abuse. It's an insidious form of abuse that has been around for a really, really long time, without really a name to call it. Okay. All right. So maybe we can do something about it. So it's good to be able to identify a problem, But if we are identifying a problem and we don't have a solution, it can feel really disempowering and kind of sad and frustrating. And as a matter of fact, what I think can become a dynamic, and maybe it is even a dynamic that is going on, which is we have identified these problems, not with the name trusted advisor abuse, right? But we've identified this kind of perpetration. But then nothing gets done about it, right? The victims complain, nothing gets done about it. The parents complain, nothing gets done about it. Other people are, abhorred, bad apple is thrown off to the side. All these kind of like non-solutions happen. And you can almost see how in that kind of hopelessness, alliance, traumatic alliance with the perpetrator or with the system might be a way through that kind of hopelessness. So not only does not having solutions, is it kind of inhumane, but it actually, identifying problems without solutions can actually keep the trauma dynamic alive. All right, a lot of words. So we're going to apply again the socio-ecological model in order to address each layer of the trusted advisor abuse problem. And ultimately, we want to improve reporting and investigation, right? We want to improve reports and that people can make reports and they know where to make reports and they know what to make reports about, right? You could see that those parents didn't even know what they should be reporting. And then to make clear, transparent investigation. And some of those outcomes will hold offenders accountable, but obviously, there will be due process, right? That there will be due process in then adjudicating whether a person is actually guilty. So on the societal level, we want laws. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. On the community level, we want more transparent procedures, right? A lot of times organizations, oh, that's HR, oh, that's confidential. Oh, that's confidential employee information. Okay, I think we have workarounds there. I think we can, get a couple of eyeballs into the situation without violating people's, privacy. So on the relationship level, training within these organizations of their staff and volunteers, clear training around trusted advisor abuse. Let me be clear. Training around trusted advisor abuse within these organizations for staff and volunteers. Clear expectations about how to advise people within a trust organization, right? What are these clear expectations? How do you do it? And then clear reporting processes. So everybody knows how to report this stuff, right? And recognizing, obviously not all reports are going to be, a case of trusted advisor abuse, but every report is telling us really, really good information that something's amiss, something's wrong, and maybe it's even an early warning sign for us to address sooner rather than later, which then becomes more training, clearer expectations, and clearer reporting processes. On the individual level, how can you protect yourself, right? Or alternatively, how can anybody protect themselves? We want to increase people's knowledge about their rights, give people skills about how to protect themselves, and in particular, how to say no, and then who to go to, right? Who's this safe connection that this individual can actually go to? Provide a lot more information about trusted advisor abuse in order to increase awareness so people actually recognize it, which, probably means that some people might be, in a trusted advisor abuse relationship and actually discover that through this information. That's actually highly likely. All right. So on the societal level, systems level, culture level. So by society, we mean, maybe California society or American society. Systems level, the child welfare system or the criminal justice system. On the culture level, we're talking about broad American culture. The dominant culture is what we're talking about here. So society can strengthen laws related to reporting and investigation. As I said, societies that have few protections for victims have a lot of perpetrators. And societies that mainly focus on protecting perpetrators' rights have a lot of perpetrators, So let's strengthen our laws related to reporting and investigation. Society is responsible on many levels for this situation. The overall messages about the value of children or vulnerable people, or people who are involved in any sort of a collective or associative activities. Messages can actually sound positive, but they're actually negative. So, for example, athletes are strong and can take care of themselves, right? Football players are strong and they can take care of themselves. They can take it. Okay, well, if I want to be a football player or an athlete, and I say that something's going on, does that make me weak and that I can't actually take care of myself? I'm not actually an athlete. That the cultural messages are, if you do report this, then you know what? You're kind of the weak link in the chain. Also, society is responsible for the laws and the punishment. What laws, who gets charged, who gets sentenced, how long they get sentenced for. That's all societal stuff. Plus, we have strong religious and cultural messages about authority, about trust, and about obedience. And that definitely affects reporting too. If I am a participant in a religion with a belief structure and they tell me things about what to think about this, this faith personnel person over here, that's pretty powerful, right? I'm sure there are many people out there who were raised in certain cultures or certain religions where authority, trust, and obedience are strong messages. And that really affects reporting. Okay, on the community or organizational level. One is to clarify the procedure to report and investigate. What is it? Is it clear? And generally when I, maybe make suggestions to an agency about how to clarify these procedures, I say, let's make it visual. Let's make it more of a flow chart. Or an infographic rather than a policy in a binder with all kinds of policy words that, maybe don't even make that much sense. So we want to clarify the procedure to report and investigate. Folks might be familiar with something that's called the Dear Colleague letter that the Obama administration sent out in 2014 to, maybe it was even earlier than 2014, in maybe 2012, maybe 2014. Anyway, the Obama administration sent out a letter to all the universities who had then confidential, almost secret investigations over Title IX violations in terms of sexual assault reporting and investigation, and they were held to a much higher standard. So that is an example of attempts to clarify the procedure to report and investigate. So the agency, the cooperative, the university, the faith-based nonprofit, the school, or the other entity that employs, certifies, ordains, or otherwise oversees or includes the abuser, that allows access but also provides coverage for the abuse, is part of the abuse. And therefore, it behooves them to clarify the procedure and to start training their staff and volunteers on what trusted advisor abuse is, how to identify it, and how to report it. And that's for staff as well, right? That we're burdening the athletes, or we're burdening the students, or we're burdening the children, or the prisoners to then report on a prison guard, right? There's staff responsibilities too. So within the community, we're talking about training folks so that they know their responsibility for reporting these things as well. The entities within the abuse often have poorly managed oversight procedures, and they are also very focused on their own status, their own prestige, or their own ranking. So that is the kind of organization that the perpetrator looks for. They look for an organization that is poorly managed with poor oversight procedures. So they're looking for unclear procedures. But they're also looking for an organization that is very interested in its status in its prestige, or where it ranks on the rankings of the best universities, or the top, wrestling universities, or, whatever it is. So that's who the perpetrator looks for. So not only is the community benefiting by clarifying the procedure, they'll actually prevent perpetrators from applying to their organizations. These preferences sacrifice reporting and investigation for their positive reputation. They're basically sacrificing, children or other vulnerable populations for their reputation. And a lot of these organizations, when their reputation is in tatters because they didn't address trusted advisor abuse, they often don't get it. They don't see it. How did this all come crashing down? They feel actually victimized. On the interpersonal or relational level, we have to give people within our organizations clear expectations about safety and about who gets reported for what, where, and how. So we want these clear expectations to our staff and volunteers, or anybody else who, has access, who has especially any kind of face-to-face access, or the physical body of the child or the athlete is in their care, right? Are there trusted advisors who are deep in a basement, coding or something like that? I'm sure there are, but especially when this organization provides access to human beings, then we want to make sure that these expectations about safety are super duper clear, because trusted advisor abuse requires a relationship first and foremost. And this relationship becomes very important to both of them. But it is an unbalanced, unequal form of a relationship. It's not a real relationship. It's abuse. And often others the victim is connected to are the friends or the patients or the former athletes who also might be victims. So it's actually not uncommon for trusted advisors to actually operate within family units. That's super duper sad. Once undermined, right, this trust process, once it is undermined, the process of trusting someone in authority becomes problematic. But something, it actually becomes problematic in another direction too, which is we can all understand why a person would not trust someone in authority after trusted advisor abuse. But what can also happen is that a person thinks that, if somebody is trustworthy or looks trustworthy and is worthy of trust, and they give their trust, the individual who has already been abused through the trust process often has a hard time not trusting, not giving their trust, taking their trust back again, even in spite of known, actions that are going on. And then we have the self. So for ourselves, we want to increase our awareness of our skills, our rights, our instructions, what instructions are we given, and our advocates, right? Who are our advocates? And it's really an awareness aspect for the self. The body wants the conscious part of ourselves to be aware of what's actually going on, especially in terms of safety. There are unique experiences and individual strengths and challenges that are part of the variety of the human experience, right? So people are going to behave their own unique way in the context of trusted advisor abuse. And very often, some of the ways that the self behaves then is seen as the problematic cause of whatever's going on here. And that is not the case. We want to give everybody, and especially the most vulnerable out there, explicit rights related to protection and investigation. You have these rights of protection. And, ultimately also acknowledging how often these systems, these communities, and these relationships of trust have failed the most vulnerable. And here's how we investigate it. And the investigation has to be transparent. No, that doesn't mean, pillaring a person out in public, who then, maybe isn't as guilty as was charged. What it means is that we know how the investigation is conducted. It is conducted the way that it is supposed to be conducted, and we hear the organizational outcome of what has happened. So, police, convicted, or, all of these things are actually of public record. So there's no reason an organization shouldn't say these things. But you can definitely understand why organizations don't. And then we want to build inside the individual skills related to speaking up, speaking out, taking action, doing something to increase your safety, and to identify relationships that are based in safety that actually connect people to safety for that individual. Okay, so that was also a lot of info. I want to bring Lorena back. Lorena, what did you think about those layers? Here, I'll go back to the overview.
Yeah, I thank you so much for breaking it down layer by layer. It definitely helps me personally understand why trusted advisor abuse is so complex, and the different individuals who are involved, and not just be the perpetrator and the victim. There's other realms and layers at the societal levels, the laws, at the community-wide level, in how we all perpetrate this, and additionally, just how the relational and interpersonal. So I really thank you so much for breaking it down layer by layer.
Fantastic. Okay, so from a public health perspective, there's another model that we use in public health, and that's called the prevention model. So in public health, what we're doing is we're always trying to prevent. We're trying to prevent trusted advisor abuse in the first place, right? Prevention is the best medicine. So we want to prevent it from happening in the first place, right? This is level 1. Primary prevention is giving people general education, making everybody aware of it. People who will never encounter it in their entire life benefit from knowing about trusted advisor abuse. And to have trusted advisor abuse as a public health model for addressing these things for organizations such as Safe Sport or other empowered oversight agencies that honestly have to be held to high standards externally, because these kind of oversight committees can get watered down with their authority very quickly. The next level is called secondary prevention, and this is the intervention level, right? This is when somebody has already been exposed to trusted advisor abuse, or it is already happening, right? It has not been prevented, it is happening, and we want to provide information about what it is, processes about how to report it, and give information about the response. Specific information to the victim or the reporter, but then general information to everybody else about what it is and how to deal with it. And this is how we are handling it. And just as an aside, I'm starting to have like a little thought bubble. And my little thought bubble is this, is that very often organizations have these early warning signs, these early signs of trusted advisor abuse, and they erroneously think, if I talk about it, that's going to destroy my organization's reputation and all this good work that my organization does. So trusted advisor abuse solves that conundrum, which is trusted advisor abusers are omnipresent. They're around us. So we are going to see this. And so it's a matter of, here's how we deal with it, rather than, oh no, clutching pearls. Oh no, this would never happen to us. That's actually exactly who it's going to happen to. And then we have the third level in the prevention model, and that is treatment. That's called tertiary prevention, and that's for individuals for whom trusted advisor abuse has developed into an actual situation where it's been identified. It often has police involvement, a court case, restitution, victim services. It's kind of going down, right? So we have these 3 layers of prevention. And every organization benefits from understanding these 3 levels of prevention, and then accordingly addressing each level. Trusted advisor abuse reveals one of the great unspoken truths. No one should be trusted blindly. Trust, we have our emotions around it, our feelings around it, strong relationships that are, bound in trust. But yet, if we give our trust blindly, we often are vulnerable to abuse. So a healthy dose of skepticism, even in the most trustworthy individual, is healthy all the time. So our goal here, before I hand things over for Lorena to talk about the cases, is really to, for us as professionals, for us as trusted advisors, to be a safe connection. And so this is one of the things that I highly recommend, is that if you're working within the publicly funded system, with populations that are by definition vulnerable because they are involved in the publicly funded system, what we want to do, lost my train of thought, that for us, we want to no longer use the word relationship. So what I'm suggesting is that in lieu of saying the word therapeutic relationship or student-teacher relationship or coaching relationship, that we use the word safe connection. That, I have a connection with this person, and I am a safe connection to athletes. I am a safe connection to students. I'm a safe connection. And when the word safe connection doesn't seem to describe what's actually going on, ding, 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 an alarm bell has just sounded, and we might need to bring in some fresh eyes to see what is going on. So being a safe connection is consistency and, being available to all in an equal way. But the reason why I can do this is because I don't overinvest, right? That, this athlete, he's going to make it, and here's this one, but here's puny athlete over there. I'm not really interested in puny athlete, right? So instead, it's all athletes. Some are going to go on to be great athletes. Some are not going to become great athletes, and yet they get treated the same. Know and respect laws, rights, and boundaries. Do no harm. This hurts me more than this hurts you is a sign of a trusted advisor abuser, right? Harm to help usually does not pass the external visual test, right? Bring somebody else in. Let's see. Do you think this is harmful or helpful? As I'm hose spraying my athletes down, right? Use an invitational approach. Offer information rather than engaging in rescuing behavior. So would you like to hear about trusted advisor abuse rather than you are being abused? Address the safety, security, and stability of the very person in front of you. Even if it's the perpetrator, right? Because we want that perpetrator to be as safe as possible, to be as secured as possible, and definitely to be as stable as possible, right? So, whether it's the abuser or the victim or anybody else, that we're addressing the safety, security, and stability of that person who you are talking to, not talking about a third person that we can't do anything about because they're not a part of the conversation. Stay present focused. Don't get into the details, right? If you're a mandated reporter, you do not investigate. Make that report. If you're not a mandated reporter, which all of these folks are mandated reporters, right? We're all mandated reporters within the trusted advisor context, but we don't have to investigate, right? I form a reasonable suspicion. I make a report. I detail my suspicions, and then there is a system ideally designed to actually review that complaint because that's good information, even if they find it unfounded. There's something still going on. Provide access to basic needs for an individual. And this is really when talking to people about, in our case, trusted advisor abuse, right? I noticed that while I was talking about it, I got very thirsty. I kind of needed to go to the restroom. I didn't because I'm doing a webinar. But, when we're talking about these things, our body kind of has needs. It often needs reassurance. It needs nutrition. It needs rest. It needs a break. Offer choices that are simple, clear, and within reach. Not abstract questions like, what coping skills do you use? But simple, clear, within reach. Would you like the phone number for a crisis hotline? Can we call it now? Would you be willing for me to call it now to show you how to use this number, right? So there's a variety of simple, clear, within reach, tangible, actionable choices that we want to emphasize within these contexts. Emphasize action, doing something in order to achieve coping rather than feelings. How are you feeling about this with trusted advisor abuse? That's going to get you nowhere real fast, especially with many victims and victims' families who are unaware of trusted advisor abuse, right? Their feelings are, hey, this guy is safe, or this guy is a good doctor, or this lady is, a nice actress who's just inviting me over to script reading, right? These are very nice people. My feelings are, these are nice people. And my feelings are, I like these people. But what are the actions of these nice people? Right. So trusted advisor abusers are hugely manipulative of people's emotions. And they often make promises that they can't keep. But they make these promises. They tell people what people want to hear. So what are their actions, right? What are they actually doing? We're probably going to require a variety of ways to talk about this, to give multiple formats. We've decided to try to make a podcast or some sort of a storytelling format to be able to really talk about trusted advisor abuse in a way for people to get the information. But we've tried postcards, and we've tried websites, and we've tried letters, and we've tried all kinds of stuff, and we will not give up. We're going to try more formats. But generally speaking, visual formats tend to help people absorb information more factually. That's why watching people's actions is more factual than listening to what they tell you. And then one way for us to stay as a safe connection connected to an invitational approach is ask for agreement rather than understanding. Do you understand the reporting process, Lorena? Yes, I do. Of course I do. What do you think I am, an idiot? Instead, we ask agreement. Lorena, do you agree to use the reporting process? Then she might say, well, no, why not? Because I don't even know about the reporting process. I've never heard the reporting process. I can't agree to use something that I don't even know exists. So it turns out when we ask for agreement, try it with your own kids, as a matter of fact, as just an interesting human experiment that you can perform. Ask your kids, do you agree with this punishment that your parents are now, proposing? No, I don't agree. Well, why not? It's unfair. It's this, and this, and this. Okay, what do you think is a reasonable agreement and a reasonable punishment? So that's the way that we actually get understanding. We can hear what people actually think or understand or know or consider about a situation when we ask for agreement. But when we ask, do you understand? It creates that power differential. And that is actually but a thin layer of trusted advisor abuse. All right. So guys, my piece has kind of ended here. Sorry for talking so long, but I do want to bring Lorena back. I want to ask Sydney, any questions, any comments?
Yeah. Sean brought up a good point that as a clinician, oftentimes you are the first entry point for a trauma-exposed person to rebuild their trust in the world. So to demonstrate that you are worthy of trust, and trust is earned, not just given without any evidence that it should be there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let's see, what are the actions, right? Mm-hmm. What are the actions? How does a safe connection act? And if we are wondering how a safe connection acts, bring somebody in, bring in some outside eyes. Is this action, is doing this, okay? Is it helpful or is it harmful? Ask other people, right? Let's get some more eyes, transparency on the situation. Fantastic. Anything else, Sydney, or any comments from Sydney?
I definitely think I really like what you've said so far. And I think the shift from relationship to safe connection is a really interesting one, because it also puts responsibility and forces a reevaluation of what sort of work you're doing and who you're working with, not overstepping boundaries and possibly re-abusing someone who's already vulnerable and has been abused.
Yeah. but Sydney, it's for your own good. It's for your own good. I really have your good at heart, as I'm X, Y, and Z, right? So that relational model can get twisted around real fast. Let me bring in Lorena, and I'm going to turn the pages as Lorena tells me.
Yeah, thank you, Gabby. We're in the home stretch, the final 20 minutes, and so I wanted to go over just some red flags that should be that you should watch out for, educate yourself on, and then I'll also discuss some specific cases of trusted advisor abuse that are also listed on the website if you want to further explore that after the webinar. So first off, just recognizing the red flags, specifically within religious institutions, spiritual institutions, and institutions of faith. And first, just recognizing who are the trusted individuals in those contexts. So it could be a priest, it could be a bishop, minister, it could be a meditation leader, a spiritual guide, a retreat leader. And it's a major red flag if those trusted individuals utilize aspects of faith to control and gain access to vulnerable people. Additionally, something that Gabby had really emphasized was leaders who capitalize on that power differential, whether it's that they're exploiting or coercing. Those are the people who do not have your best interests in mind. Another red flag is when a leader masks their inappropriate behavior, whether it's using the guise of religion or using the guise of their profession, that it's important to recognize that an inappropriate behavior is still an inappropriate behavior, and that it's easy to fall prey to a leader who says, this is in accordance with religious teaching or in accordance with scripture. And I think that's why some people can be so vulnerable to this, because the abuser will try to mask it in all of these other different layers, but really abuse is still abuse. Another red flag is leaders who create and instigate trauma bonds in order to abuse and control people. And a trauma bond is really characterized by tactics of manipulation and brainwashing, and keeping that victim in the victim role, and keeping that victim, dependent on their abuser. Another red flag, leaders who are attention seekers, constantly in the public, constantly needing those awards and accolades. Not only is that just indicative of narcissism, but also it's a ploy in an abuser to get the public to think that their actions are good and their actions are intentional, but really abuse is going on behind closed doors. And then other behaviors to watch out for, grooming followers, isolating people from their closest relationships and cutting off that support system, physical threats, stripping one's sense of self. Someone had mentioned this in the chat, forcing someone into the victim role and silencing the victim, and punishments for disobeying. Of course, this is just a really brief list that we, Gabby and the interns, got together to draft this out. But if you have any more red flags, we really just welcome you to type that out in the chat, because we're always looking to expand the list. And we just want to hear from you about different, anything that you've experienced in your own life or any other red flags. So now let's discuss some cases of trusted advisor abuse. One of the main things I did for this project was just to get a bunch of resources, a bunch of reports that were happening in the media, and put them all on our website so that you can read through and see a lot of different cases that are happening out there. So our first one is Pennsylvania's Catholic Church. So the United States government launched an extensive investigation into the Catholic Church after numerous victims came forward, stating that they were molested, they were raped, abused by their priests as young children. And what was revealed that there was over 1,000 sexual abuse allegations spanning 7 decades against 300 priests in Pennsylvania's Catholic Church. And the horrific abuse that was detailed, a lot of it actually went on in the church-run orphanages, and these places were just a breeding ground for abuse. And not just in Pennsylvania, but across the globe. And there was just an utter lack of oversight, lack of accountability. No one was monitoring these priests. And of course, why would they? These are divine people, holier than thou individuals. And now people recognize that these people can even be abusers. And so, although these victims did receive some compensatory damages, a lot of these victims felt as if there was still a lot of trauma that was never addressed, and the payment only resurfaced negative emotions and negative memories. And it's true. According to the survivor, John Quinn, money cannot fix or undo years of abuse, rape, and molestation. And these victims, who are now well into their adulthood, now have to grapple with and deal with that long-lasting psychological trauma. In our second case is police officers. And additionally, just how police officers use their badge and their status and their power to abuse others. This particular police officer, a former Oklahoma City cop, Daniel Holtzclaw, was sentenced to 263 years in prison for raping and preying on African American women. His strategy was to target the poorest neighborhoods in Oklahoma City and to target a marginalized community so that his behavior could go unchecked and it wouldn't be caught. And so his victims were ranged from as young as 17 years old all the way up to 57 years old. And this man's behavior basically went unchecked for months. And it wasn't until his final victim, a 57-year-old grandmother, who came forward, reported the crime, went to several media outlets to get the story out and to warn others about this man's behavior. And then finally an investigation launched and led to his conviction, and he was convicted of rape, oral sodomy, and sexual battery. And what was revealed, and something that you will see in a lot of cases of trusted advisor abuse, unfortunately, is that systems that are people in leadership or the overarching systems will fail to act on early signs of predatory behavior. They will ignore initial complaints that come in. They will discredit the victims, and an investigation may not even begin until dozens of victims have come forward. And so for this particular case, 14 total women were victimized before something was finally done. Okay. So our third case has to do with a sober living home fraud scheme. And it differs from the first two in the sense that the primary motivation, that primary drive, is money. So for the first two, it was sex, it was even power, but this one was money. And so a sober living home in Santa Ana, California was shut down after it was revealed that the owners were swindling millions of dollars from medical insurance companies. And Stephen Lamonaco and his co-conspirators, these were the owners of this sober living home, they swindled $3.2 million from medical insurance companies. And these men essentially just preyed on extremely vulnerable, susceptible individuals. They had no regard for these people's well-being, no regard for their health, no regard for their recovery. And their primary motivation was just to make money, exploit these patients, and profit off of their addictions. They didn't care who was hurt in the process, and their motive was just to pull as many patients into this medical insurance fraud scheme and traffic as many people as they could so they could make money. Eventually, these men were caught, and they are currently serving time in prison, and they're guilty of money laundering, insurance fraud, lying on insurance applications, and trafficking innocent patients. And our fourth and final case here, although we only have time to go over 4 cases, we really do encourage you. There are dozens of cases listed on our site, from healthcare providers to teachers to athletic coaches to yoga instructors. So we definitely will reshare that link with you guys, and you can educate yourself on some other cases. So this one here is about 3 Dartmouth College professors who are listed here: William Kelly, Paul Whalen, and Todd Heatherton. These men were fired for harassing and sexually assaulting their female graduate students. They're guilty of groping, sexting, seducing, and raping these graduate students. These men utilized their dinner parties and house parties to lure women to their house. And they would use an otherwise safe opportunity, since professors do have get-togethers with their students to form those relationships, build professional ties, and network. They exploited that and lured women to their house and to essentially assault them under their supervision. And the victims claimed that they would be punished if they tried to rebuff or politely decline their advances, and these professors would retaliate and threaten their academic and professional careers. Finally, I believe it was 7 women came forward, got a lawyer team to represent them, and they got a case going, and they were able to launch an investigation into these 3 men. And it was revealed, just like many other trusted advisor abuse cases, that the college failed to protect these students. They mishandled several sexual assault reports. They ignored years of predatory behavior. These professors were essentially given a slap on the wrist. They were told, stop hosting parties, stop drinking with their students. And these professors, their behavior went unchecked. And so the college not only failed to protect the students, but they perpetuated this cycle of abuse against women. And these 3 men were eventually fired, let go, and $14 million was awarded to the students. Yeah.
So as we conclude our Trusted Advisor Abuse webinar, what we're going to ask you to do is a couple of action steps. So the first action step is to, increase your use of the term trusted advisor abuse. Try it out, see what people say about it. An example, a teacher who engages in sex with a student is committing trusted advisor abuse. I'm not sure how many typos are there, but a teacher who engages in sex with a student is committing trusted advisor abuse, right? A faith personnel who tells people to give him money without any kind of proof that money has been given is engaging in trusted advisor abuse. Educate and inform your own community, your own organization, school board meetings, town halls with elected officials. Do they have clear training on trusted advisor abuse, reporting on trusted advisor abuse, investigation of trusted advisor abuse, right? Notice that folks will often not say any words. Send newspaper links about cases to us. We'll post as many as possible. If it's out there, posted by a credible news source that's been fact checked, we're happy to, help people become aware of this dynamic of trusted advisor abuse. Write a letter to the local paper, your legislators or other universities, demanding better oversight by boards, police, and others tasked with investigation and discipline of the people they license or certify using trusted advisor abuse. Refer people who have been abused to the website Stop Trusted Advisor Abuse so they can get information about what we call TAB. That's just our little acronym for Trusted Advisor Abuse. It doesn't actually kind of work, but it kind of does. And their rights, your rights, and what you can do to stop it. So this is really, we really want people to become activated, talking about it, to become activated, recognizing it and talking about it, and to actually intervene, and for us to have outside forces coming in and adjudicating what actually happened. All right, folks, what would you be willing to do? Are you willing to start using trusted advisor abuse? Do you want to start increasing training in your organizations around trusted advisor abuse? Do you want to alert legislators about trusted advisor abuse? Do you see some uses of trusted advisor abuse to a particular problem or case or situation or person that you're working on? So Lorena, any thoughts, final thoughts?
Well, I know for me, I've learned so much on just the language I should be using, calling it what it is, trusted advisor abuse. And I learned today that don't use the word the relationship, it's safe connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really, really important. And then just seeing what I can do, whether it's writing letters, talking about it with my friends, signing petitions.
Let folks know. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody.